Hello, and welcome back. UFC 291 is upon us, right? The BMF title is on the line this weekend. Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier. Huge fight. It's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out because they fought, I can't believe it's been this long, but 5 fucking years ago back in 2018, right? So it'll be interesting to see how their games have developed, who's made the adjustments. We'll talk about all that good shit when we get there, right? Also on this card, Jan Blachowicz taking on Alex Pereira in a huge fight at light heavyweight, right? You got Kevin Holland versus Michael Chiesa, Wonderboy versus Michel Pereira, and then who's the other one on the main card? Ferguson versus Bobby Green. So the main card is fucking stacked, right? This is one of the biggest cards of the year. And man, it feels like 2023 is just going to be a good year to be a fight fan. I mean, I think it's been good to us so far, and this might be the best card of the year. So let's run through the prelims real quick. I'm sure since the last time, I know I missed the Aspinall fight. I was in fucking Nashville for one of my buddy's bachelor parties this past weekend. So like, life's been hectic, and like I saw Aspinall win and everything, but I just don't want to take too much time rehashing those past fights because fuck it. You kind of missed the opportunity to talk about it. These fights are tomorrow. So let's just jump straight into doing the picks and focusing on this card. And yeah, hopefully I can work on being, a little bit more consistent, but we'll fucking see. Hasn't gone well so far. Anyway, Matthew Semmelsberger versus Uros Medic. I always have like kind of a place in my heart for Semmelsberger because my one buddy coaches football out of like that Frederick, Maryland area, right? Like high school football and stuff there. So like Semmelsberger trains in that general area. And anytime you have those like sort of connections, it's just kind of cool, right? And like I feel like those areas like Maryland, especially, and then the area where I'm from, right? Like north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, like those states aren't really known for having big MMA scenes. And you're starting to see some guys come out of Philadelphia now. So seeing guys like Semmelsberger coming out of that area, right, is pretty cool. So I always root for Semmelsberger a little bit, admittedly. That'll be a fun one to watch. Same thing on the next one. Miranda Maverick is associated with the gym that I train at, right? I'm actually about to go fucking teach a private and get my ass beat at no-gi class here in like, a couple hours. So getting this in before that. But I'll be rooting for Miranda Maverick as well, right? I think she's going to beat up on Priscilla Kuchera. Why can't I pronounce her name? Kuchera? She's going to beat up on this Priscilla chick, right? I can see her face. I just can't pronounce her last name. I've seen her fight. But yeah, I think Miranda Maverick wins that one. CJ Vergara versus Vinicius Salvador. And then we get on to the prelims that are going to be aired on ABC and ESPN, right? Jake Matthews versus Darius Flowers. Roman Kopylov, he looked really good in his last fight versus Claudio Ribeiro. Derek Lewis versus Marcus Rogerio de Lima. And then Gabriel Bonfim versus Trevin Giles to cap off the prelims. And obviously, like I said, the main card is fucking stacked. So let's start breaking it down. First fight, I think this is going to be a 170-pound bout, right? Let me check on their site. I'm guessing between Kevin Holland and Michael Chiesa. Yeah, they're fighting a welterweight. Man, this is an interesting one because I feel like this really is like the classic kind of striker versus grappler matchup. And here's the thing, right? I feel like we've seen Chiesa look really impressive since moving up to 170 pounds, right? Especially against guys like, if you're looking at their frames, Neil Magny is a really good fight to look at, especially because Neil Magny is so experienced in the clinch and Chiesa was still able to like get to those positions, overwhelm him, and get him to the ground. But the problem with trying to draw comparisons between Holland and Magny based simply on their frame is that they just don't fight the same. Like Kevin Holland, he's much more threatening. Kevin Holland has a fucking educated lead hand. He jabs well. He changes up the timing on his jab. He brings it around. He hooks with it. He leads with that hook. His lead hand is very educated, man, and he covers a lot more range than somebody like Neil Magny will when he's striking, and he's a lot more unpredictable and a lot more explosive. Kevin Holland is much more dangerous when you're just standing on the feet with him than somebody like Neil Magny is. And they're also they just have different styles. Like Holland is one of those guys like knocking out Jacare from the bottom, right? He is one of those guys, and even people might disagree, but I really think if you go back and watch the breakdown and slow things down, Holland's fight against Chimaev, he had like some relatively impressive levels to his defense in terms of understanding how to defend the chokes and stuff and the positions that Khamzat was putting him in. But Khamzat just had answers at every turn, overwhelming, kind of a short notice fight. But man, Kevin Holland is a black belt. And he is able to generate a lot of length from the ground. And I'm interested to see, because we've seen Chiesa. He's very good. Very good. He's actually a pretty good wrestler. He's got great fucking jiu-jitsu when he's on top, but there are situations where he gets put on the bottom. Like, again, I'm thinking like Vicente Luque was able to wrestle back up against him. Like, we've seen him make mistakes. And man, Kevin Holland is a guy who capitalizes on mistakes. However, there's a lot of variables in this one. It just depends on who I think starts setting the tone. I think it's going to be very difficult for Michael Chiesa to cover the distance that he needs to get the takedowns. And even when he does, like I said, I think Holland has a lot of length and he's going to be able to generate openings and capitalize on little mistakes that Chiesa might make to either get back to his feet, hit sweeps, or just hit some unorthodox things that keep him in the fight. And I think that in order for Chiesa to win this fight, he's kind of got to smother him. And I don't know that he's going to be able to smother him for 3 rounds. Like, he's going to have to be able to shut Holland down from the bottom. And I think with Holland's length and jiu-jitsu skills and just like I said, his unorthodox movement and his understanding of positioning from that, I think he's going to be kind of hard to hold down. Especially because another thing that you also got to think, Chiesa hasn't fought in a while. And another thing that I like about Holland is that he stays active. And say what you want, people need to talk. They talk about his need to focus more on the octagon because he's talking a lot. But I think it's maybe when I watch him, he looks very calm to me. He's a very calm fighter. Even when he's in bad situations, he's not necessarily stressing. Maybe talking is a way of dealing with that stress also. I try not to pretend like I know what's going on in their heads, but just observing what's happening, it looks to me like he remains calm in those positions and he feels very comfortable fighting. You know what I mean? So Chiesa's going to have to knock a little bit of that ring rust off. He's going to have to establish his range against a guy who is much longer than him, much quicker than him. Much quicker, much more explosive, much more dangerous on the feet. I mean, Chiesa doesn't have a single knockout on his fucking record, right? All of his wins are decisions or submissions. So it's like, is he going to be able to do that to Holland? My gut kind of tells me no, but we'll find out. Chiesa is, like I said, if he gets on top of you, he is very impressive with his, I was very impressed with what he did to Magny and what he did to RDA, but there are moments where I feel like guys who are a little bit more explosive, maybe like Vicente Luque, a little bit more like, he's not going to beat Chiesa probably in a strict jiu-jitsu match, but just like another guy who just capitalized on opportunities. I could see Holland weirdly finding openings like that either let him build back to his feet or maybe he catches Chiesa in something weird. I don't know. I just think that there's a better chance for Holland to have answers on the ground than there are for Chiesa to have answers on the feet. So I'm going with Kevin Holland in this one, man. I think he's going to get the finish. I think he's going to get Chiesa out of there. And the key for Chiesa, like I said, is to keep covering distance. You'll see like Chiesa also likes to bounce around on the outside of the cage a lot. And he's comfortable doing that, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to present him with an opportunity to take somebody like Holland down, because Holland is so long and is going to be comfortable fighting at that range. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was able to bait Vicente Luque into kind of a nice takedown, but Luque doesn't have that same range. Holland also stabs out with that lead. I just feel like this is Holland's fight to take, man, if he fights well. If he's on top of it, if he can use some of his wrestling defense and improve in some of those areas. I think that Chiesa struggles to pressure forward because he's not a great boxer. And if he tries to do that against Holland, to get his back against the cage where I think Chiesa needs him, I think Holland's going to capitalize on opportunities and Chiesa coming in. You know what I mean? And if Chiesa's moving backwards, I think his opportunities to take Holland down in space in the center of the octagon are going to be limited. So the more I think about it, man, the more I really like Holland in this fight. So moving on to the next one. Another exciting fight we got going on here, right? We got fucking Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. Bobby Green's a huge favorite coming into this fight, and I mean, understandably so, man. Tony Ferguson has had a rough fucking skid. He's on a 5-fight losing streak, and it all kind of started after that fight with Justin Gaethje. But I think there's something to be said about what Gaethje brought up in the press conference, and that this is an unforgiving game, man. And Tony Ferguson now, he's almost 40 years old. He's fighting in a very competitive division, but also after Gaethje, he got beat up badly, right, in that fight. Like I didn't like watching that fight, and especially in the octagon like that, you were just hearing the impact, like the empty crowd, right? you were just hearing the impact of all the shots. And man, you run into Oliveira next, decision. Dariush next, decision. And then Michael Chandler KOs you, right? Gaethje and Chandler are still the only 2 knockouts on Ferguson's record, but goddamn, the Chandler one was bad. The Chandler one was really bad. You hate seeing guys get knocked out like that, right? And then he got finished by Nate Diaz. So it's like, when I look at this fight, it makes me nervous for Tony because it's, we're talking about him potentially going on a 6-fight skid, but he's also fighting a guy in Bobby Green who has fucking slick-ass hands. Slick-ass hands and really slick defense. And there are a couple places where I think Tony could actually find success in this fight, right? Tony is unorthodox and his striking is very creative, and I think that if he can start creating weird angles, you got to understand, like, Bobby is he's a sharpshooter, man. His offense is smooth, but he uses that shoulder roll a lot defensively, and a lot of his offense is set up because he's making guys miss, right? And it's letting him kind of find that range and fire back, and it lets him set up his hands. Tony attacks from such unorthodox angles that there might be opportunities for him to start crowding that space. And if he can start pushing Bobby up against the cage and not even necessarily looking for like takedowns, because, man, I think in terms of pure wrestling, Bobby Green has the advantage in that one. Bobby Green can wrestle, man. I know you don't see it a lot because he's primarily a boxer, but in terms of pure wrestling, I think Bobby Green out-wrestles Tony. But the chance that I see for Tony, we'll talk about the other place I think Tony could potentially have an advantage if they do start wrestling. But on the feet, I think Tony has to close off the distance a little bit. If he starts reaching for Bobby and not being able to get to him, man, Bobby's just going to sit there and pot shot him and fucking pick him apart. But I feel that if Tony could start pressuring forward and attacking in unorthodox angles, working his way into the clinch and getting those elbows going, working the body of Bobby in those dirty boxing scenarios, Tony's just a dog when he starts getting in there, man. The only thing that makes me nervous is Tony kind of like blitzes forward and he almost throws his punches at like shoulder level with his chin up as he enters in. And I think early on in his career, like I said, his angles and everything were a little bit sharper, but as he's gotten older and like you saw Gaethje, some really crisp boxing, was able to expose that, right? Man, I don't know. I think that honestly Bobby Green probably beats Tony up in this fight. I just think he outboxes him over the course of 3 rounds. I think he just busts him up, and it'll be very hard for Tony to get the fight anywhere where he'll have an advantage. The other place I was going to say he may have an advantage is actually off his back. We've seen Tony submit guys like Kevin Lee off of his back, right? He's got a nasty dart choke again, but those might stem from situations where he starts working things up against the cage and trying to snap the head of Bobby Green down. I think that the best chance for Tony is to get in tight, work on your feet in the clinch, or in those areas where Bobby can't make you miss clean and fire back, right? However, I just think that Tony leaves a lot of openings. And like I said, earlier on in his career, the angles were sharper. He was a little bit more explosive. He's getting there faster. His footwork was a little bit cleaner. And he was still, you got to remember, he took a lot of damage throughout his career still. The boogeyman, he was just willing to eat it. And I don't know that you eat it the same way or that you're willing to keep walking through that fire the same way. It's a tough fight for Tony. I think he could get it done, but I think it's going to take a lot for him to be able to pull this off. And like I said, maybe off of his back is the other advantage he has, getting elbows and stuff, maybe throwing up submission attempts. But I think Bobby Green's I think he's too polished on the top, man. I think he's too good on the feet, and I think his wrestling's good enough to keep this fight where he kind of wants it. But I think the prerogative has to be on Tony to kind of get aggressive in this fight and, like I said, close that space and make it fucking dirty. But yeah, tough fight for Tony, man. I'm going with Bobby Green in this one, but kind of rooting for Tony to turn things around a little bit. Okay, Stephen Thompson, number 7 ranked, right? Welterweight in the world, going against Michel, I always call him Michel Pereira, number 15 right now. And Pereira actually just missed weight by like 3 pounds. He weighed in at 174, so 3 pounds over the 171-pound limit. Since it's a non-title fight, right? They get that extra pound. 3 pounds is a lot, and they're going to have to agree to probably fight at catch weight. I'm sure Pereira is going to be fine part of his purse, but this is a fight, man, where I really kind of feel that the best chance for Pereira to win is to kind of catch Wonderboy in some sort of weird exchange where he blitzes him and kind of disrupts the rhythm of whatever Wonderboy is doing. Otherwise, I think that Stephen Thompson is good. But this is what I fucking hate about picking fights like this. Like, if you just watch them on tape, I think it is very obvious that Stephen Thompson has a big advantage in striking in terms of pure skill and distance management and shot selection over Pereira. On paper, Stephen Thompson should win this fight. But I just have this weird feeling that it's one of those fights where Pereira's going to find his way in and land that weird shot on Wonderboy. I don't know why. I can't shake it. Like I said, if everything plays out the way I think it actually will in my head, like if I'm thinking about the fight and trying to think, how do I think these two match up against each other? I think Pereira is explosive. He's exciting to watch. But the footwork and the discipline of Wonderboy will just wear on him. And we've seen Pereira fade a little bit in late rounds. I just think Wonderboy is going to put it on him. And it'll be very hard for Pereira to start connecting. And Wonderboy just picks him apart over the course of the round. Or over the course of the rounds, right? And that's how in my mind, that's how I think it goes. But I just have this fucking weird feeling about the fight that Pereira is going to find some crazy unorthodox way to break through that, like, karate stance of Thompson and land. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't even know who to pick for this one. And the weight missing thing, like Pereira's a big guy, so if he lands, it's going to be impactful. Wonderboy is getting older. He has a lot of fights under his fucking record now. It's not like he hasn't been knocked out before. Pereira just might have that unorthodox, like kind of weird, crazy style that lets him land shots on a guy like Wonderboy, where most people who maybe are like more typical, boxers or whatever might not ever find that opportunity. But Pereira might create it because his striking, so it's, you know what I mean? It's just like I said, I feel like I said it 100 times, but he's unorthodox. I got Wonderboy. I think Wonderboy wins. Like I said, I can see Pereira landing that shot, but I never like betting on that shot, right? But to me, I don't know why I'm staying away from the betting. I think it just feels to me like something could be brewing for Pereira somehow. I don't know how to explain it, but I think Wonderboy gets it done. I think he's more skillful. I think he controls the range. And I think as he starts tagging Pereira, it'll make him more desperate. He'll start overextending. Wonderboy starts tagging you more often, more hitting you with harder shots. And I think he gets Pereira out of there if he's on his A game. But Pereira has that ability to just knock him out, I think, or pull something weird off. So we'll see. We'll see, man. I don't know. I'm not extremely confident in that one either way, as you can tell. But let's move on to the next fight, which, to be completely honest, I'm not that confident either. Co-main event, Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, and Pereira making the move up to 205 right after his loss against Izzy. Again, if you just are looking at them like on paper, it looks like Jan has all of the experience, right? He's a little bit older, but he's a big guy as well. He's 29-9. Like, he's got so many more professional MMA fights than Pereira. But look how quickly Pereira was able to ascend to the title. I think that an important factor in this is obviously going to be the wrestling of Jan Blachowicz, but it's also going to be the unorthodox striking of Jan. And Jan is just a big, dense guy who has fought at the 205 pound weight class for a long time. And I said this when he fought Luke. I hated the Luke Rockhold fight, but I said this when he fought Luke. Jan is used to being at 205, and Luke has not settled into that weight class yet, right? And the same thing, I know that Pereira is big, but the same thing is true for Pereira. He has not felt a true 205 pounder in the octagon yet. And Jan is fucking strong. I used to think about Jan don't get me wrong. I always knew he could box. He had power. He has, like I said, a little bit of this unorthodox striking style that lets him land. He kind of blitzes guys a little bit. It lets him land. But I used to think about him as pulling off slick submissions and having pretty good wrestling when he was able to get on top, right? pull off these like weird chokes and stuff. He finds his way to the neck. Yeah, man. I mean, I just think that Pereira hasn't felt somebody like him in a real fight. And I know he trains with like Glover Teixeira, and Teixeira tapped out Jan and all that good stuff, right? But it's different because Alex still hasn't experienced this in a UFC, in a fight setting against a guy who is really trying to fucking win, like that fight intensity. And Jan is a previous champion, and man, he kind of ragdolled Izzy a little bit. Like when he would get a hold of him, he was just obvious, so much stronger than him, and it also let him invade the space. Now, will he be able to invade the space the same way against Pereira because of Pereira's power? I don't know, but I think I like Jan Blachowicz from this fight. I think that, like I said, it's the fact that he's been at 205 for so long. Oh wait, I'm on the UFC site and this is 215. That has to be a fucking typo, right? This is at 205. But yeah, UFC site says 215 right now. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, Jan is a big guy. He's filled out for 205. He knows how to wrestle. And another thing that like I've noticed about Jan is he does a good job of checking outside leg kicks. You can beat the inside of his legs up a little bit, but the way that Pereira throws his kicks, he likes to flick out the outside leg kick. And Jan does a good job of checking those. And Jan also, when he enters, this is going to sound like a crazy comparison, but if you go back and watch the fight against Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva, Jan kind of enters his striking exchanges the same way Bruno Silva did, and that let him... Bruno Silva was able to pressure Alex Pereira backwards against the cage in a lot of instances, using those striking blitzes. And you have to respect them because Jan has real power, but think about the difference between like Bruno Silva and Jan in those instances. Don't get me wrong, you can make a lot of improvements, but Alex has never been faced with somebody as skillful as Jan. And I think that Jan wins this fight, man. You could also have one of those performances where like Alex comes out, he establishes the range, he just like kickboxes and picks Jan apart, but I just don't see a world where they don't end up grappling unless Alex catches him clean. But like I said, Jan is willing to fight, man. And like when they get into a fight, he's going to start blitzing forward with his own shots, and I think he's going to be successful against that kind of more open style of Alex Pereira, and it's going to let him land and start pushing the fight into closer distances, up against the cage, into the clinch, into takedown scenarios. And man, I just think Jan's going to... If Jan looks good, right? If he goes out and does what he's supposed to do, I think he can win this fight. Like I said, I think it's going to be very hard for Alex to keep Jan off of him throughout the entirety of the fight. And it's a tall task. Like I said, I think Jan boxes his way into some of those clinch exchanges and then starts level changing and closing off that distance. Alex hasn't fought anyone like Jan, and he hasn't fought anyone as well-rounded as Jan. You got to think, the only reason, and I'm not the only reason, I don't want to like phrase it like that, I guess, but like the matchup that Pereira had against Izzy was a very, like to win the middleweight title, was a very favorable stylistic matchup for him. Like, does Pereira beat somebody like Whitaker? You know what I mean? Like, does Pereira beat somebody like a Duplessis after what we saw now? Like, we don't know. Like I said, he fought Bruno Silva. Who was the other guy? Michaelitis, I think his name was. Did I get that right? But like, we just don't know. And I'm not willing to put money on not knowing. I think Jan has proven himself time after time. I think that he has experienced what it's like to be a champion at this division. He has real knockout power of his own. And just because you're a kickboxer doesn't mean that if Jan invades your space and connects that he can't knock you out as well. So I think Jan has potential to end it, just the way Pereira does. And I think that Jan has more experience at the division. He has more MMA experience. And he's the most well-rounded. He's going to be a championship level fighter in a lot of different departments that Pereira hasn't seen at that level yet before. I just think that, man, if I'm, again, analyzing it from that perspective, I think Jan wins this fight. And I think he does, honestly. I think there's a chance that Alex could go out, like I said, establish the range and start landing those big shots. But I just think like he just holds his stance like more out here. He's bouncing up and down. And I think if Jan blitzes and closes that off with these flurries of punches, Pereira's going to start backing up. And I don't know if Pereira has the same slickness and side-to-side movement that Izzy has, that we saw that he was able to implement to avoid some of those shots, that Jan landed. I think Jan might be backing Pereira straight up a little bit more than he was Izzy, and Jan might find more success landing those unorthodox shots. But I don't know. I think Pereira could land and end it. Like I said, I could see it going either way, but something in my heart is leaning towards fucking Jan Blachowicz in this fight. The more I think about it, the more I like him. All right, Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje for the BMF title, right? And these guys fought, it seems like so long ago, but 5 years ago these guys fought. And what a war it was then too, right? And I think the biggest question, and it's an obvious statement, right? But like the biggest question mark in this is who has improved the most. And if I look at both of them in terms of technical refinement, I kind of think it's Gaethje. I think that Gaethje's boxing, like if you watch their first fight, there were a lot of moments where even when Gaethje was finding success, there was a lot of big overextensions he was missing with his left hand. But now that left hand that he was like kind of reaching out with, he's got one of the best left hooks in MMA right now. So those opportunities where Dustin was like sliding out of the way with good head movement, I think that's a lot more crisp. It's coming around more tightly. And we're going to see Gaethje landing in a lot more exchanges that he was missing in the first fight. I think that Gaethje's boxing is a lot more compact. His work with Trevor Whitman is like I said, the difference in technique is unbelievable. He still takes, Gaethje will still take big shots and you'll see him like he overextends, but everything is just coming from better angles. It's tighter, right? And for the most part, he is in more control. He doesn't overextend as often or as wildly. And Dustin struggled with those leg kicks that Justin threw in that first fight, and I think Justin's going to bring him heavy in this fight, and that's going to take a toll. Here's the thing, though, is like Poirier's able, just like he did I think Gaethje was kind of winning the second and third round. And guys, what I'm saying, it's not that Poirier hasn't improved. I just think that Poirier's boxing has always been really fucking crisp. And it's probably better. His footwork's better. I'm sure there's things that he's gotten better at and worked on, right? But he's always been a really good boxer. And I think Gaethje's always been a really great leg kicker with good boxing. But Gaethje's boxing in terms of MMA, not in terms of going and getting in a fucking boxing ring and boxing somebody, but Gaethje's MMA boxing has come a very long way. And I think his ability to mix in those leg kicks, his wrestling background, because Poirier can take you down, but it's much more unlikely that he's going to take down somebody like Gaethje because Gaethje has that wrestling background and can usually keep it on the fight or on the feet. So, man, Gaethje was hammering that uppercut in against Fiziev too. It's like, I just think he's looked so fucking good with his hands. To do what he did against Fiziev is tough too because Fiziev is highly technical. I just think that Dustin is a little bit, he's heavy on his feet because he's, like I said, he's a boxer. He throws combinations though, and that'll have a tendency to, like you'll see Justin was shelling up constantly in their fight because Dustin just never stops with the volume and he rips combinations. He doesn't throw one or two punches at a time generally. He will mix in kicks. He's never going to like turn the hip over and get like full power or extension into it or anything, but he'll throw him out there. Like Poirier is just a dog and so is Justin. And that's why this fight's so, like fucking, there's so much hype around it. And I just think that Justin has the diversity in weapons is going to be a problem for Poirier. Like I said, I think those leg kicks will start to add up in the way that Justin's boxing has been looking of late. I think that a lot of those misses that we saw in the first fight end up being connections in this fight. And that'll allow Justin to start I think he's going to finish Dustin in this fight. Like I said, I think that it's not that Poirier hasn't improved or gotten better, but I think that Justin's wrestling is going to be enough to, like I said, prevent Poirier from taking him to the ground and maybe putting him in a compromised position. Poirier's a legit black belt too. So it's not like Gaethje wants to get into a position where Poirier's on his back or some shit like that. Like Poirier can choke you the fuck out, man. Poirier's got very solid jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying it's on Oliveira's level, right? Or that his grappling is obviously like not on Khabib's level, but like Justin doesn't want to get put in situations where Poirier does have back exposure presented to him, right? So I think though Justin, his leg kicks, his striking, his defense, the way he does always shell up, he protects himself a little bit. Like, he's crazy, but he does get his hands up. You know what I mean? He protects his face in those exchanges. I think he's become more responsible as a fighter in terms of like he's been a little bit more conservative. He's still crazy, but like he's learned to temper that down a little bit. I just feel like all signs are pointing to Gaethje to win this fight, but I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, who you got. Let's go through a recap one more time. Just run through the main card real quick. I got Holland over Chiesa, right? I just think that Holland is going to be able to control the range and maybe show some unorthodox stuff on the ground if it goes there that gets him out of like some hairy situations. But Chiesa could go out and like, I just think he kind of has to smother Holland to be successful. Like, Holland's not a guy you can like leave openings for. He capitalizes on them. Bobby Green versus Tony Ferguson. I think Bobby Green's just going to be a little bit more crisp, a little bit more slick with the head movement, but Tony Ferguson has to close that space off, I think, and like get in those clinch areas and make it dirty, and he might have a chance. Michel Pereira versus Stephen Thompson. Man, like I said, I think Stephen Thompson wins this fight. I think he's the more skillful fighter, but I could see Pereira pulling off some shit where he like connects in some weird exchange or some like just some weird scenario playing out where Pereira picks it up. But I think Thompson's more polished and more skilled. I think he gets the win. I like Jan Blachowicz against Alex Pereira. It's not that I think Pereira can't win or that he couldn't come out and just like completely, you know, throw Jan off with the striking and start establishing range. And it's not that I think any of that's an impossibility. I just like Jan's experience. I like how long he's been at 205. He's a big 205-pounder, and he's a pretty good grappler, man. I think that his striking is pretty good too. He carries serious power. I think he can blitz Pereira in order to back him up and start putting him where he wants him against the cage, where he can go to work more effectively. And like I said, I'm leaning that way because of what we saw from Pereira against a guy like Bruno Silva, where Pereira still won, but there were moments where Silva was able to kind of blitz him and even get him to the mat at times. So we'll see. Poirier versus Gaethje. I'm going with Gaethje just because, like, I could be wrong. Poirier could have made a ton of improvements. Maybe he's going to be checking the fuck out of Gaethje's leg kicks and making these reads, but I just feel like technically Justin Gaethje, like I said, has made a lot more refinements over the past 5 years, and I think it might be enough for him to get it done in this one. The leg kicks will start opening up boxing opportunities, and like I said, where he was overextending before, I think he'll start to land a little bit more successfully in this fight. Yeah, that's it. That's going to wrap this one up. Like I said, I'm going to go get ready, get my ass beat at jiu-jitsu for a little bit, and yeah, wait for these fights tomorrow. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. As always, much appreciated. Like I said, let me know what you think of the fights down in the comments. Give me your picks. Hit the subscribe button. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed all that fucking good shit we have to ask you to do, and have a good day. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Enjoy the fights.